Sir, great to see you. Thank you for joining us and Chasing Life. I got to say, you and I have talked a lot over the years. You name it, from heart disease to COVID, vaccines. You are on the cutting edge of so many different aspects of medicine and science for a long time. I'm curious, do you incorporate a lot of your own learnings into your own life?
Well, I really did this time. It kind of had a big effect on how I do more to, now that I'm getting into the older adult bracket, to do more to stay healthy and try to prevent age-related diseases. So yeah, this one, because of the kind of depth of research I did, I really changed some of the things that I was or wasn't doing.
Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I turned 70, so I'm a septuagenarian. Yeah.
You look great. I've seen you physically. You're lean. You look fit. Obviously, cognitively, you're very astute. You're super inspired and inspiring, I will say. So, and whatever you're doing, I guess keep doing it. It's working for you.
Oh, you're really kind, Sanjay. I really appreciate it. But
I mean, I have followed your work since Cleveland Clinic days. I followed you. I've been a journalist for 25 years, and for 25 years, your name has always popped up in all these various cardiology, longevity, AI. I watch your talks. Again, you hear this hopefully from a lot of people, but you really have been able to stay highly, highly engaged. And I'm in my mid-50s now, and sometimes I think, can I stay as engaged as Eric Topol did, 15 years from now? I don't know.
I don't know. You're still my favorite physician journalist, and I don't have any question. You cover things really broadly. It could be, one day it could be bird flu, and the next day it could be, wildfire effects, and so you are able to kind of cover the waterfront too, which is terrific.
I do think staying cognitively engaged is really good for your overall physical health. I think that, and we could talk a little bit about that. But why super aging? What sparked your interest in that?
Yeah, well, several things did. Several years ago, beginning shortly after I got out to Scripps in end of 2006, we started a big study, Welderly, where we wanted to, unlike everybody going after longevity, we were going after health span, and we were able to enroll 1,400 people who were average age 87, who'd never had been sick with any chronic disease. That took several years to get those folks enrolled and then to do their whole genome sequence. And, back then, doing whole genome sequence in such a large cohort wasn't common. But that was really fascinating to us because we didn't find much in the way of genes. So I've kind of been percolating along saying, well, gee, what accounts for these people that have this remarkable health span? Mm-hmm. And then, a couple of years ago when I met one of my patients, Lee Russo, who now is 98 and has never had any disease, cognitively crisp. And that was said, I've got to really get into this. This is a topic that is fascinating. So that was really what prompted me to put the book together.
So we're opening this episode, as you may know, with Lenore Lee Rushall, 98 years old, as you mentioned. I'm so curious about people like this because she's always been healthy, always been cognitively sharp. But has she, from where she is now is remarkable, but did she decline from where she was? Like, was she even better at 70 years old and has declined now at 98?
That's a really good question. I mean, the first thing, of course, that I noted with her is that all of her relatives, her parents and her siblings, they died young. In their 50s and 60s, and how she got to 98. So she does a lot of oil painting, and her collection and her gallery. She's won awards, but now when she's doing I asked her about this flamingo picture she was going to do, and she said, my hands aren't quite as steady to do that fine detail now that I could, just a few years ago. So there's certain things that have changed for her, but for the most part, in terms of her wit and her ability to articulate everything, and her enthusiasm about all that she's doing, I doubt that could have changed. It's fairly impressive.
So what is it then? Well, I mean, so you're making the case that this isn't genetics. I think this isn't her family. Her other relatives died young, or died younger at least. What has happened with her, do you think?
Well, it's a really enigmatic question, and of course, could it just be a random stochastic event in some people? That's possible, and of course, genes do have are an underpinning, but in a small percent of people for healthy aging. So one of the things that's striking about her is that she has a very good social network. She has these 8 women that are near her age. They're all younger, of course, but who they play Rummy Cube every week. But she also enjoys her solitude and doing these 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles and her painting. So she has a really good balance of not being isolated, but also having hobbies. And we've learned these things, as you well know, are important. We don't give these types of things, just like you were saying, getting cognitive stimulation. We don't give that enough credit to promote healthy aging.
I think part of the reason, and I struggle with this as well, but part of the reason we don't give it enough credit is because it's a little bit of a more tenuous line to draw one to the other, cause and effect. I mean, if you lower your cholesterol, if you're a runner, if you maintain really good lean muscle mass and bone density, you can kind of wrap your head around that. But the idea that someone plays card games or is an oil painter, how does that translate to a longer life? I mean, I don't know if you have an answer to that, but let me put it this way. Is it that people who are like Lenore, is she more likely to take better care of herself? Or is this an indicator that she's taking better care of herself, more likely to follow up with the doctor, be compliant with any meds, if any, that she's on? Is that the connective tissue?
That's certainly part of it. I mean, she hasn't missed any COVID shots, and she has, had a good relationship with her primary care doctor, and certainly, just a person who does look after herself. And she, I think, will say, why does she a standout? Why is she a standout? And she'll say, that's part of it. She's always been careful about her nutrition, about, going for walks, being active. And she's a good sleeper. That doesn't hurt either. So, if you check a lot of the things that we've learned are important, she would fulfill many of those. I mean, she's not doing strength training, but, there's things that you could add. She doesn't really get out in nature very much, but, we've learned so many things that are related, as you say, not necessarily cause and effect, but they sure track with healthy aging. And she has quite a few of those that's been part of her life for many decades.
Do you think, just broadly speaking, we'll talk more about her, but do you broadly think that someone like Ms. Rahhal is an exception to the rule, or can she be the rule?
I think she can be the rule in the years ahead. That's what I think is so exciting. But the other patient that I presented of mine, who has been a patient for 35 years now, he's the more norm today. He just turned 99. And his wife said to save the date for his 100th birthday party. So, I mean, he has been a pure cardiac issue. Many things like heart attack, bypass. I put in stents years ago when I was back at Cleveland Clinic, and he had COVID and he was hospitalized, and he got through all that. So he is resilient, but he's the norm now. But the difference is about him, Sanjay, is that his disease was fully preventable, but we now know how he could have prevented it. We didn't know before, but look how he's gotten through all these triumphs of modern medicine and is just incredibly intact. And so that's another way to get to super agers. It's the more common way, where you're going to have one of these diseases, but hopefully we're going to be able to prevent them And of course, there's this other thing that we have done pretty well over the years, especially in cardiology, is secondary prevention. We're much better at that than we are for primary prevention of cancer, heart disease, and neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's. We've been terrible, really, for primary prevention, and that's been a fantasy for maybe millennia.
In the book, in Superagers, you write that only about 20%, I think 19% of over 400 centenarians managed to avoid chronic disease. That was from the New England Centenarian Study. The majority, that means, developed comorbidities and were classified as survivors, having a diagnosis of this age-related illness before 80, or delayers, meaning they were diagnosed at 80 and beyond, which I think is really interesting. If genetics aren't that important in terms of superaging, how important are they in terms of developing disease?
Well, that's really a key because as we've learned with polygenic risk scores, which can be obtained, quite inexpensively, they do help us as one layer, one source of data, define genetic risk for these three age-related diseases. But now we have all these other ways, like organ clocks, like 8 organs, including the immune system and the heart and the brain, and inflammatory markers. And so with AI and the ability to process billions of data points for any person, and critically, all three of these diseases take at least 20 years to actually take root in our bodies. So if we can't get ahead of that with a 20-year lead time, we're not too smart.
I want to talk about those three sort of broad classes of disease. I think you're talking about cardiac disease, cancer, and dementia. One thing, though, just comparing and contrasting Ms. Rachol and Mr. RP, given that Mr. RP had some significant health challenges, does he think of life differently, do you think, than Ms. Rachol?
Well, I mean, they both, and then if you go to the 1,400 that were in our study that fulfilled the criteria, they generally are very upbeat people. They're not complainers. With Ray, he's interesting because he has a wife that really looks after him in terms of, all the kind of lifestyle factors that we'd be interested in to promote healthy aging, whether it's walking or nutrition. And he'd say, Doc, can you help me live to 100? This is 35 years ago. And I don't know that.
So he was 65 roughly at the time.
Exactly. So
just retired and wondering if he can, make it to 100.
Oh, no. Oh, that's another thing. He's never retired.
Never retired. Interesting.
A lot of these people just keep working.
Interesting.
He goes into the office several times a week.
Really?
No, yeah. So this is another interesting thing is that they're committed. They have a purpose. They're very, upbeat about what they're doing. And, I'm usually one to look at hard data. And these are soft data points, that like you were alluding to, Sanjay. So it's really interesting.
So you have these two patients. They're both 98, 99 years old now. But Mr. RP, Ray, had heart disease for 30 years.
Yeah.
So since roughly his late 60s. Got COVID at 96. Not terrible. We didn't wind up in the hospital, but he got COVID at 96. That's concerning. He must have a lot of resilience, would be my guess. Is resilience then a characteristic of superagers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's tied into the immune system predominantly, because these three diseases have a common thread. Not only are they, 20 years plus in the making, but they all are related to our immune system being either in disarray, immunosenescence as we age. Some of us, have more of a problem of our immune system doing its thing of protecting us, and than others. And that immune system, a whole chapter in the book is about the remarkable ability we have today to, like a rheostat, to turn it up or down. That's why we need a real immunome, which is in the works right now. To be able to say, when you go for your checkup, how's your immune system? We keep coming up with more ways to amp up our immune response, whether it's personalized neoantigen vaccines or better than the drugs we have today, checkpoint inhibitors, all sorts of antibody conjugate drugs. And if we can detect people who are at high risk for cancer and then check their blood, their plasma for any tumor DNA, so it's at the microscopic level, we can then get their immune system into high gear so they never have to have that cancer take hold, no less spread. So that's why I do think we're going to make major inroads for all three of these age-related diseases.
So I think a lot of people understand the immune system when it comes to fighting off an infectious disease, a virus or bacteria, and perhaps even with cancer. Your immune system is constantly maybe targeting abnormal cells, mutated cells, and hopefully quashing those from the body. But what about with regard to cardiac disease and dementia? How does the immune system play a role there?
Yeah, well, what's fascinating, it's the inflammatory response in the brain that is what's causing the loss of brain tissue. And that is really what drives dementia, Alzheimer's, as well as Parkinson's, the second most common neurodegenerative disease. So if we can block inflammation and the immune response in our arteries, in our brain, or on the other hand, bring it to a higher level of protection against cancer, these are the ways that we're going to, have that idea of preventing the big three.
Are we thinking the immune system as friend or foe here?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's both. The amazing thing today is that the only way we can assess an immune system status in a patient routinely is looking at the ratio of their white cells, neutrophils, to their lymphocytes.
Right.
I mean, how dumb is this? I mean, why haven't we know how important this is? It's the second most complex system in our body after the brain, and we haven't done anything about it. So now, the data keeps pouring in. If we're going to get ahead of the age-related diseases, we've got to add in this missing component. You have to have the right level of immune system protection or protection from it at the right time in the right person. And we're going to get there. We don't have all the pieces, together, but we have enough to make a difference even now.
In the book, you write quite a bit about these proteomic organ clocks, which can estimate the pace of aging for your organs, your brain, your heart, your liver, kidneys, and your immune system. So these clocks can sort of tell you if your heart is aging faster than the rest of your body. Other molecular clocks could calculate your biological age versus your chronological age. And then there's the epigenetic clocks that you write about as well, which read parts of your DNA, for example, that could be taken even from a saliva sample.
Exactly.
If someone gets genetic testing, a lot of times you're sort of told, look, you may have a predisposition for something. Maybe it's Alzheimer's dementia, for example.
Right.
It feels vague and sometimes unnecessarily alarming for people because they don't really know what to do with that information. But instead, you're saying with the addition of doing proteomics, looking at proteins, looking at the genes specifically, and also using large AI models, you can start to be much more predictive about things. Do I have that generally right? Yeah,
I mean, we can assess anywhere between 6,000 and 11,000 proteins in our plasma through a limited blood sample. And that one tube of blood, those with AI, we can then say organ clocks, like your heart, your liver, brain, kidney, are any of them out of whack in terms of aging compared to your chronologic real age? Next, we have this marker, which is extraordinary, p-tau217, a single protein. And that protein predicts Alzheimer's more than 20 years. And it's as accurate as cerebrospinal fluid from a lumbar puncture or a PET scan, a tau PET scan. It's incredible. The polygenic risk score by itself has been somewhat of a disappointment. That's all we had up until recent times. You'd say, okay, you're at risk for Alzheimer's. But you didn't know if that was age 79,
right,
59, 99. You didn't know anything. It was so vague. Now we have this, advanced ability to take notice 20 years before. And then, of course, if you can reduce that, that ought to be accompanied by protection and at the very least, significant delay and ideally full prevention. The prevention may take, more help than just lifestyle. It may take some drugs that are in the pipeline. Many drugs are being developed to help in this. So it isn't that we don't just rely on lifestyle factors. But that's another thing. We know that lifestyle factors are tied into prevention of heart disease, 80 to 90%, and about half of cancer and neurodegenerative diseases. We don't get people to adopt these lifestyle changes and become, fanatics about it. But when they find out about a particular risk in them, the chance would hopefully be much better.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Eric. I think, as a general rule, adopting healthy lifestyle habits into your own life, that's always going to be the advice. But the idea that so many people don't do it, despite knowing what a healthy lifestyle is, once you have a marker, in this case, you're talking about a p-tau 217, and you see it elevated, and then you see it potentially come down in response to lifestyle changes, that's wildly motivating, I think, for people.
Absolutely, kind of like a cholesterol test for heart disease. The fact that we have a test like that now, right, that we can, when you really bring down your cholesterol, you really bring down your chance of developing heart disease, which is terrific. We haven't had that for the brain, right? So this is big stuff. And of course, only in recent years have we seen the remarkable refinement of these microscopic detection of cancer, the so-called multi-cancer early detection tests. The problem is, of course, a lot of testing we do today, like mass screening, it's not being done because a person's at risk. We treat everybody the same, but we're so much smarter than that. 88% of women will never develop breast cancer in their life. Why do we recommend all women have these frequent mammograms, which are accompanied by all sorts of false positives, even false negatives, and anxiety and callbacks and biopsies and all sorts of unnecessary stuff? We are much smarter than that now with respect to being able to define who is at risk, when, what, and how we can counter that risk and prevent diseases. So that's why I'm excited. It isn't about reversing aging. It's about a whole different approach to preventing age-related diseases.
And possibly cutting down on too much testing. It sounds like.
Yes.
Being able to take all this data, including genetic testing, but then proteomics, protein testing, and AI models, and then create not only an idea of your risk, but sort of a timeline of that risk as well. Let me ask you this, just on a personal note. So my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer on a routine mammogram when she was in her late 50s. She's doing well still. She's in her early 80s now. I have 3 daughters who are, almost 20, 18, and 16. How do you think their lives would be different based on everything you're saying? I'm worried about them developing cancer, let's say, in their lives. Instead of starting mammography at, what is it now, 40, 45? I can't remember what the guideline is.
There's 2 different ones, but 40 or 45. Yeah. And it went down. It was 50, and now
it used to be 50. So and I know there's always debate from with regard to the preventative task force in terms of what that age should be. But let's just dispense with all that and say, so should they get genetic testing, get proteomic testing, and develop their sort of risk score now?
Well, for one, your mother could have BRCA testing if she didn't have it, BRCA1 and 2, and polygenic testing, because there's a bunch of other genes that are tied into risk. So it'd be nice to know about her genetic story, which can be obtained. I don't know if they did that. A lot of physicians don't go after that, which they should, because of the effect on the next generation. And we men can be carriers of BRCA1 and 2 as well, and other significant so-called pathogenic mutations. So that's one thing. But then your daughters are young, and they're not really at the time where they would get into, unless there was something that turned out to be the case with your mother. So at any rate, when they were a bit older, then your daughters could get the clocks. They could get, they'll have their immunome. They'll have their proteomic clocks, even epigenetic clocks to see how they're aging body-wide. And when you have all these layers, and so they're kind of each are checkpoints on the other, so you're not just going after just because you have one thing, one out of the norm range. You say, how does that compare to these other layers of data, and integrate all that? So that's when they would hopefully, if they are at risk for cancer or heart disease or neurodegenerative, they'll know way ahead of time and be on a really great program so they don't get these diseases.
So, and again, I just want to make sure we're defining this term clock really well. Yeah. So, in addition to genetic testing, and by the way, my mom was negative for BRCA1 and BRCA2.
Oh, good.
If you have this capacity to not only do genetic testing, but also to introduce the concept of a clock to it, saying, okay, you're at risk. Now let's put a clock on that risk. Here's the timeline of that risk. Which, by the way, I didn't realize you can get so granular as to say, hey, look, maybe in your early 70s is when you'd start to develop symptoms of Alzheimer's, for example. Though with regard to breast cancer, if you can get that granular, what then? Does that mean maybe, let's say one of my kids had that and they had a clock attached to it, they would get more frequent mammograms, or what would it mean for them?
Yeah. So remember, when you get this, there's two levels of the clock. One is body-wide aging. I kind of liken that to how are we rusting? How are we adapting to aging? And that's going to just say your real age is 65, but your body-wide aging is 70. That says something's just not as often. Now we say, okay, let's look at the organ clocks. We have all the vital organs to compare with your actual age. And they say, you know what? They all check out except this immune system. And then say, we're going to, be checking this on a more frequent basis. And we're not this primitive way we do it today, but a more advanced way. And that's when you say, the immune system down, this person has a high risk for cancer. That, of course, isn't the case with your daughters, at least from your mother's data. So, but let's say somebody that was at high risk. That's when you would do serial assessment of their plasma for tumor DNA, which is the earliest sign. You don't want to wait for an MRI. You would go with a blood test that's much more sensitive than looking at, or better than looking for, Goomba on the MRI scan. So there's so many things that we have some control over to be a healthy ager now.
Are you a super ager based on everything you've learned about yourself?
I hope to be. I wouldn't get there. If I can eke out another 10 or 15 years without an age-related disease, that'd be great. And I've really doubled down, tripled down on the things that I can do to help get there.
In terms of your lifestyle?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't doing strength training. I was a terrible sleeper, and now I'm tracking that every night with both a smartwatch and Oura Ring to try to get maximal deep sleep. I wasn't working on posture, balance, and I wasn't careful about ultra-processed foods. Now I'm reading labels, and I've developed a real aversion to things that are in plastic. And then don't use the microwave to heat up something that's in plastic, because that is the worst case scenario. But, so many things that we can do. And what's exciting, these are kind of dark times in biomedicine with gutting of the research budgets and, public health and whatnot. But I'm incredibly optimistic about where we're headed right now in terms of our ability to, which we didn't have before, to prevent these big three diseases.
You've always been known for that, the evidence-based component of things, because, look, there's a lot of, I don't want to call it noise, because maybe that sounds too disparaging, but there's a lot of folks out there who are talking about aging, talking about longevity. They don't have the evidence behind this. And I mean, you really spend a lot of time reading, putting that evidence together, making it make sense for you, and then helping make sense for everyone else, which I really appreciate.
Thank you. It means a lot coming from you, Sanjay. I mean, I think your earlier point, a lot of these people do have good intentions, but they kind of get ahead of themselves, recommending things that, have never had any backup, never had the data, the proof points. And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of confused people out there.
Science evolves, and you write this book, and everyone should read this book. Everyone who's listening should read this book. But also keep in mind that science evolves. We learn more and more. So hopefully you'll come back and continue to educate us. Thank you for joining us, and you're welcome back anytime if you can make the time.
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed it, Sanjay. I'll look forward to coming back with the next chapter in the times ahead. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about.
You got it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.